This is Talk to Me. Your host, Joshua Toomey, bring you epic rants, anecdotes, and interviews with heavy hitters from hardcore
A new life begins!
to hair metal. This is Talk to Me.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into Talk to Me, episode 239. The guest this week is John Kevill of Warbringer. Great new album, Weapons of Tomorrow, out April 24th. And man, do we go all over the place in this episode. And we get into how his background and history shapes his thrash. So without much more of my ramblings, let's get into some Warbringer. Talk to John Kevill. Listen to glorious end off the latest album, Weapons of Tomorrow, once again out April 24th. So let's talk to John Kevill.
To the victor goes the spoils. Sound the drums of war. Raising high our banners. The legion marches forth. On a trail of conquest. We are the sons of Mars. We desecrate their shrines. Annihilate their gods. They burn. The tomb of civilizations. On the endless march, we set to fire the town. All who oppose, the gladius cuts them down. They call out for mercy, for refuge they seek. But the deafening roar of battle silences the weak. They fall. The fall of once mighty nations. Oh. The sick, the dying, the conquered, the slain. Forget their faces, forget their names. They picked us. Woe to the vanquished. Cities fall to the barbaric horde. Watch your family put to the sword. After the conquest, the men are enslaved. Children are butchered, the women are raped. Waters the once gave life run red. Your language, culture, way of life dead. Each of your sons they shall murder and burn. Till all of your people are wiped from the earth. The tomb of civilizations. The fall of mighty nations. Woe to the vanquished. The battle you have lost. The blood that falls like rain. Now your temples lie in ruins. Your people are in chains. Woe to the vanquished. Woe to the vanquished. Woe to the vanquished. Your line dies with you.
All right, guys, we've got John Kevill of Warbringer on the line. Weapons of Tomorrow comes out April 24th, and it is an absolute thrash masterpiece. So, John, how are you doing today, sir?
Well, hell, thrash masterpiece. I guess better after you said that.
It makes
I'm
these
doing fine
crazy times better, right?
Yeah, in the immediate time, we're just sitting in our house nonstop. And the weather just got nice. It's all sunny, which is a wonderful change. But yeah, going a little nuts over here. If it weren't for interviews and putting out the record or such, I'd really be pulling my hair out right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's got to be a tough time for the artist to put out albums at this time. It's either I guess it could be a double-edged sword. I mean, I guess a lot of people don't have anything better to do than to listen to the new album. But man, it would be nice to get out and tour.
Yeah, you pretty much nailed the situation as far as I can tell. That seems to be the one potential upside. I feel like, Murphy's Law. I feel like Murphy's Law hangs over my entire life pretty heavily.
Yeah.
And, so I feel like, oh, yeah, I put out a sixth record, and we're going to try to, push the success of the band further with this record. We're so proud of how the thing came out, and it shows us at our best. We got to release it during coronavirus. Shit, So that stings for sure. But we got to do the best we can. We got to believe in the quality of the music we're putting out and just hope that people will respond to it based on that.
I agree.
We're not really able to do what we need to do to promote the damn thing.
Right. Yeah, this will probably be one of the first times you were probably at home when the release came out, correct?
Pretty much. I mean, usually within like a week of release, we're out. I mean, that's what you do. That's how you support a record. So it's the entire model is you put out a record and you tour on the record. That's what Warbringer's been doing for over a decade now, and it's just weird to not be able to. I don't think I would be gone yet, but I think I was gonna be out of here like at the very beginning of May, and that never happened.
Right. The the climate right now is a lot of bands doing online online concerts, online this, online that, and thrash is kind of one of the genres that doesn't really lend itself to you and an acoustic guitar sitting down and playing songs off the new album. So I mean, what are you going to do to kind of promote this in any other kind of out of the box way?
We've done one thing actually that is kind of cool. So I agree with you. I think that kind of like a live stream concert from a thrash band is kind of it's almost like a tease, because what do you want to do at a thrash show? You want to, get in the pit and jump off the fucking stage and bang your head and stuff. It's that raw energy and adrenaline.
I liked adrenagen in there. That was a good word. You might want to use that one day.
Adrenagen, yeah.
Adrenagen.
Yeah, it's what they put in Monster Energy, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, that raw adrenaline there, just it seems like from your screen, it's not quite the same thing. We thought about that, but what we ended up doing is actually something we were kind of doing when this was the pandemic was in its infancy. We filmed a major documentary about ourselves and the record, and I wrote up a 17-page script for the thing because I was like, I wanted to tell a certain narrative.
Oh, nice.
Regarding the record, and it's called The Science of Thrash. We put out the first episode for the Black Hand Reaches Out recently, but it's 10. We did one for the whole record. What's kind of cool about this is I really tried to write it in such a way that we broke down not just what's on the songs, but the process, how we wrote the songs. So who from the band speaks in which order is actually arranged chronologically to who had the first idea that we started building off of, then who added to it, and then we might have circled back around to the first guy. So actually sequentially show the process of how we wrote each and every song on the record. Nice,
yeah. And people love that stuff, man. Some of my biggest episodes are when I talk to a band member about a specific album and we go track by track. People love, diving into that type stuff.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that was the hope, basically, is one thing, too, I just wanted to show, like, hey, man, there's a lot of thought and content in these songs, and we wanted to do a piece of media that really brought that to the forefront. Nothing gimmicky, nothing silly, just like, here's, a deep dive on the content of the record. And we try to write a record that's got enough content that you can really do that dive.
Yeah, and, I'm a huge documentary guy, and I'll watch a documentary on anything, no matter what it is. It could be a shark, or it could be, a country music artist I've never heard of. I'll watch it on
Okay,
every...
I'm kind of like that, too. I was watching a good one last night. I might want to recommend you then.
All right, we'll get to it. And, but what it is like, even if you had a preconceived notion about something going into it, once you watch that documentary, you're like, man, there was actually maybe a little bit more substance behind, said pop star that you just wrote off for being a manufactured artist. But then you watch a documentary on them, you're like, oh, wow, actually they wrote their songs, or they had experiences that mimic your life and things like that. So, any kind of documentary, anything you can do like this, what you're doing now, that can shed some light on what you guys are doing, I'm assuming is always going to be positive.
Yeah, I like to think so. And I think it's just cool that we get to kind of, the idea is to let the viewer sort of get inside our brains and see how we did it. So, because I get that question in interviews a lot, and I feel like I can never sort of properly explain it. So this is an attempt to like really explain something as kind of nebulous as the songwriting process.
Right.
Because there ain't one specific process. It's sort of, you sort of got to follow the winds of where your good ideas are.
Oh yeah, agree 100%. What was what's the documentary you've got to recommend?
Oh, you ever heard of Operation Odessa?
I don't know what that is. No, what is that?
Okay, so basically it's a documentary. It's kind of made in the style of like a heist or crime movie, but it's basically about a few early 90s gangsters, and what they're doing. This guy from Russia goes to Florida, hooks up with like a American guy and a Cuban ex-spy, and these three guys put up this scheme where they're going to go into the collapsed Soviet Union. And they start out, they're getting helicopters. They get these helicopters, and Soviet military helicopters, some of the best shit in the world. And they're selling them to the Cali cartel in Colombia.
Okay.
And then, like, they finally they go down, but the way they go down is they're doing this scheme where they go out to Russia. They find these former Soviet admirals. They go to a top secret submarine base, and they're going to buy like a 1960s Russian sub for 35 mil,
right,
which is dirt cheap for what that is, to go and smuggle cocaine. And the U.S. Department of Defense and NATO get involved, because now you're talking about a submarine that might have tactical nuclear capability and all that shit. And so they're like, fuck, so they fry themselves doing this. But it's just a really crazy heist that they're trying to pull.
Nice.
One of the guys ends up not even going to buy the submarine, but taking the first 10 mil from the Cali cartel and going on the run, which is just like, dude, you got a death wish.
We've watched enough Ozark to know that's not a good idea.
No, you don't go running from the mob who, after you fucking, their whole business model depends on now killing you so that everyone in their business knows they can't be crossed. Because if they can be crossed, they have no authority.
That's insane. That's insane, man. One of the, I listen to a lot of podcasts, especially when I go to work and stuff, and I've been getting into a lot of crime podcasts. And it's funny how much, like, the littlest thing, how either A, detectives and the police are amazing at their job, or B, people are just that irresponsible, and they like leave one thing, and then, it's like they'll go back to a cold case from the 60s and find a hair and do some DNA testing and find out, the guy's been a grandfather for 20, 30 years and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's insane how people get caught doing stuff,
Oh, yeah. Dude, the other one I watched, I mean, this is, maybe we're off the interview topic by now. You can use this
we'll
or
come
not.
Back. We'll come back.
I was home all day yesterday, so I watched a whole docu-series, and then that thing I told you about, and then I watched something about the campaigns of Alexander. All kinds of random shit. But it was this one called The Devil Next Door, and it was about a guy called John Demeyuk, who was like an old fucking auto worker in Cleveland in the 80s. And as it turns out, these allegations surfaced that this fucking old guy, he went to church every Sunday and stuff. Someone's like, oh, yeah, I remember you. You were the guard at the gas chamber at Treblinka.
Oh, I watched that. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I watched that.
That was crazy. And when you talk about, like, they got this Israeli on the defense, so they actually got an Israeli attorney to defend this guy. And he becomes like the most hated man in Israel, because he's a Jewish guy defending someone who's, Holocaust survivors like look at his face and they're like, you were the one, And it's like, whoa. But then the evidence trail is actually pretty convoluted and wild. And it's like, he wasn't that guy, but the trials reveal he was at a different death camp. And so he somehow, like, the appeal process goes on so long that the guy fucking dies before anything actually happens to him beyond endless legal limbo. And it's like, Christ.
Yeah, it's a mess, man. I've got some podcasting friends in the Cleveland area, and a little bit older than me. So it's like they remember when all that shit was going on. So I was like, "Do you remember when this was happening?" And they're like, "Yeah," but do you think that you get into the documentary type stuff and even want to document your own band? We'll kind of get it back to Warbringer, but
sure.
Documenting your own band just because of your history, history major and in your knowledge for your thirst for that type of knowledge.
I think so. I think that kind of drives me to want to put something like that out rather than something that's more like, mass entertainment focused, I guess. We're not getting all like me or whatever goes viral these days. I want actual content. I believe in real substance behind our music. I don't view metal music as this disposable thing where I'm going to be listening to this record this week and a new one the next week, and they're all interchangeable. I very much keep going back to the same great records that I think are great, and some of them are totally famous and some of them aren't at all. But I want to make those. That's my goal. So I think that I kind of decided in the last record, anything we do is going to be serious and have real content and really dig into ideas and the music. And then the music itself is going to be serious and about real stuff and have real content, Yeah. I think that in some ways this is my reaction against some of the stuff I see in the world, where I think the mainstream culture is very superficial. I feel like if you're writing a song and your song's basically I have money and you would like to live my life, fuck you. That's not a very good song idea, Yeah. Not you, but
No, I got you.
Fuck the people who write this and the people who buy it. That's my opinion. No, people don't have to like it, but that's what I genuinely think. And I don't want to be that. I want to be the opposite. I want to be I think music's something that you should really have ideas in, where this song's about something. It doesn't have to be all heady every fucking time, but you shouldn't just go straight to the lowest common denominator every time either. And I like to get imaginative. I like to talk about events, and I don't you'll never hear dates or places, that kind of stuff in our songs. I always try to extract the theme from an event and channel that into the song. So if you dig into it, you can get into what I was really writing about from a more, I guess, documentary perspective. But if you just listen to the song, you'll get the picture. So an example of that is The Black Hand Reaches Out. You don't have to know anything about Gavrilo Princip and Franz Ferdinand and Balkan nationalism and all that shit to understand that this is a song about an assassination.
Right.
So I try to do it that way. There's no mention of the year, the time. So I have a certain way that I try to put real subjects into my music that I guess serves the music first, but doesn't skimp on the content.
Right. I mean, that's been one thing with metal, my whole life growing up listening to it. And, it's almost like a history lesson if you go into some Iron Maiden. And even I was joking one time on here with Mike Al from Metal Church that, when Titanic came out, I already knew the story of Titanic because they had a song about it on Blessing in Disguise. So, it's like you not only turn it on for the great music, but you also sometimes get a nice little history lesson at the same time.
Yeah, and well, it's not because you want to be in a fucking classroom and you listen to metal.
Sure.
It's just because, stuff's interesting. The story of time and all the stuff that happened to people, there's tons of interesting shit that happened there. A lot of stuff that in the, I guess the classroom setting people think is, dry or boring or something. It's dude, if you put yourself in, I don't know, in Congress when they're trying to pass an important and controversial amendment that changed the lives of everyone in the country after, or the American Civil War, any of the fucking wars anywhere, that's crazier than probably anything you or I have ever will ever lived through. So if you actually think about it, a lot of the stuff that people see as dry isn't, once you kind of apply imagination, basically. And so I think that that's something great about media and metal as well. Iron Maiden is a huge influence on me in this regard, where they can kind of put you there, Aces High, whether you know about the Battle of Britain or not, you feel like you're fucking flying. And that's, so I think that it kind of drives my theory of how to write about events and real stuff in songs, is you put the song first and the feeling first, and you just link that by the music and the aesthetic of the song to the real thing with a couple like neat references that you can, the kind that you can either kind of skip over or dig into, where it's not like in your face too much. And, like Aces High, you can tell not only that they're flying, but that they're flying in the Battle of Britain, because he says Spitfires and ME-109s,
Right.
So just a little thing. There's like one line that specifies where you actually are, and the rest of it is just flying, and the image and the feel. So I think that really informs how I incorporate this kind of stuff into songs in a way that's it's still the song. It's not a fucking lesson. It's not a documentary. The role of the song in this regard, I think, might just be to spark the interest, or to like put the image in your head and kind of break that wall to where you don't connect to the events. It puts you to where music is such an emotive thing that I think it puts you to a direct. It puts a picture in your head and an emotional in you that hits you in a different way than like reading a book about it.
Right. One thing, I'm not super conspiracy guy. Like I've never, I'll watch like the Zeitgeist stuff and be like, oh, that's a good, that's a pretty good theory. But, I'm kind of curious to see in, 20, 30, 40 years when they make the Netflix or whatever the equivalent of Netflix is at the time documentary about this time, about the coronavirus, what we're going to find out, if it was, man-made, biological warfare, or was a mistake, or, it's any of that stuff where, obviously most things that were probably being told in the press and in the media are probably sugar-coated, but I can't wait to see, kind of what really is going on right now. And it probably won't happen for another, 30 years before we really find out what happened.
Oh, I mean, I feel that way is true, because there isn't the same kind of agenda behind hindsight as there is with reporting in the present.
Right.
It will be interesting to see. I'm not a conspiracy guy myself. Actually, are you familiar? There's a logical principle called Occam's razor, OCCAM''S. And it's kind of one of the greatest things ever.
Okay.
So I'll tell you about it if you'd like to know.
Let's do it.
Okay, so this is the best thing to use ever. If you ever hear shit like we didn't really land on the moon, or any like 9/11 was an inside job, so on and so forth. Name your conspiracy theory, and Occam's razor will fucking shred it. Here's how. Occam's razor. It's just a logical principle. It's true about 98% of the time. If you don't know the answer for something, the simplest explanation that raises the fewest additional questions is the one that's probably true. That's Occam's razor.
Okay.
So let's pretend that we're talking a kid steals cookies from the cookie jar, or there's cookies missing from the cookie jar. Who did it, right? Well, it's either the kid who said he didn't take the cookies from the cookie jar and he's lying and he did it, or the story he's telling you, which is a man came in through the window. You remember that one?
Yeah.
Like a man came in and took the cookies. I didn't do it. So Occam's razor proves that the kid's lying, because for the kid to take the cookies, all he would have to do is want the cookies, take the cookies, eat them, and then say he didn't because he knows he gets in trouble. It's pretty simple. There's not a lot of there's not some wild unknown factors there.
Right.
For the man to have come and taken it, okay, who is this guy? He's willing to break into a house for some fucking cookies. How did he even know the cookies were there that he wanted? How did he know they weren't oatmeal raisin or something? And then and nobody fucking saw him and there's no trace that he's here. You have to answer all of those and come up with a plausible answer to every one of those questions in order for that theory to be true. So it's got more hoops to jump through, logically speaking, if that makes sense.
Right. No, I got you.
If you apply this to conspiracies, they fall apart and fold. It's beautiful. It's brutal. I'm not conspiratorial, but I will tell you I'm angry about the world. I don't like it. That's why I'm screaming into this microphone, making records sound like the one you hear. So I do think that a lot of stuff like, the corruption in government or something, right? People always like to think about that as if it's some grand conspiracy because things seem to be working so bad it must be, right? But there's another, Occam's razor would say, it's just fucking naked interests. That a lot of the stuff that people think is done by some shadowy deep state, or, some people go way off into like shape-shifting reptile kind of bullshit. Right. The stuff that people attribute to that is actually just like obvious and blatant interests of more or less the financial, the people who financially benefit from the way things currently are want to keep it that way. It's really just that. It's not any more complicated than that. And so, I was watching this guy, Richard Wolff, who was talking about like, look, if you have this kind of financial inequality, the only way to maintain it is to neutralize the political system. So it's not actually this wildly conspiratorial thing. It's actually kind of like, well, the shoe fucking fits. And it's sort of an obvious thing, which I think is a little counterintuitive to some people who imagine that for things to be as kind of askew as they are, it must be some grand shadowy thing.
Right.
Because they watch too many damn movies.
Watch too many damn documentaries, and that's where we end up.
Too many movies, not enough documentaries.
Yeah, true.
You watch the documentaries, you'll get the sense of how shit actually works.
Yeah,
I'm sick of movies, man. It's always like, you fight the bad guy and then he's like, you were always so naive, and does a monologue. It's like, fuck, this is stupid. I'm 33. I've seen this like 600 times. I'm over it. This sucks,
We were watching something the other night, and we had, both my wife and I both listen to a lot of crime podcasts, so we always talk about them. And can you believe that's how that person got caught and shit like that? And something was happening in the movie, and we're like, well, that would be, he wouldn't have not noticed that, and blah blah blah. Like we were just sitting there debunking the movie as we were watching it because we're so crime knowledgeable now and how the police work and stuff. So it was pretty funny that we've gotten almost too into our crime documentaries that we can't even watch a crime drama anymore.
Oh, dude, I'm like that with war movies, man. My dad passed that on to me. If you see like you're watching something, you see like a certain type of tank in World War II appear in a time where they wouldn't have had that one. I'll be like,
turn it off.
Or even in fantasy stuff, one of the ones that really pissed me off, I mean, just in general, but the Hobbit series, which was such a letdown after Lord of the Rings, the Battle of the Five Armies, a scene I really liked in the book. They had this part where the orcs and goblins are charging the dwarven shield wall. And, the fucking point of a shield wall is you sit there and you absorb the charge and you actually use the shield wall that you formed everyone into. And when the orcs are getting close to the shield wall, instead of like sitting there and taking the charge and, they break upon the dwarven anvil or something cool like that, a bunch of elves leap over the dwarves, and then the dwarves in the shield wall also charge. And I'm like, what the fuck was the point of your formation? That's so stupid. You're just doing shit to look fancy and cool. And then also I don't like the super like rapid fire shots. And also, spoiler alert for every superhero movie ever to ever be made, the good guys win.
That is true. I hate to break it to you.
Yeah, I hate to break it. Or like they did Infinity War, which is like, the good guys don't win, to be continued. And then everyone's like, oh my god, I wonder what's going to happen next. Sequel, the good guys win. There it is. No one could have seen it coming. They had a fucking recent Simpsons where they were talking about spoilers on those. And Bart Simpson was like, nobody knows what's going to happen. I alone know. He like somehow finds out what the plot of the next Marvel movie is. And Homer Simpson's like, let me guess, the good guys win. And Bart's like, how did you know?
That's always another great conspiracy, is that the Simpsons have predicted everything.
I've seen some of that, and I'm not one of those who like knows every episode.
Right.
I watch cartoons sometimes, but as far as I can tell, there might be something to that. Didn't they have like Trump as president sometime in the 90s on The Simpsons or some shit like that? That's a weird one. Someone
even pulled up a clip of I think it's like Lisa walking by a taco stand, and it says 1,200 tacos for $1,200. And they're like, see, they even predicted the stimulus check.
Wow.
So, which I would love to just buy 1,200 tacos with my stimulus check.
Oh, well, here's some news about the stimulus check. And so apparently, though, if you the $1,200 stimulus sounds great. Oh yeah, $1,200. But until you measure it against what the cost to the taxpayer is of the large scale bailouts that they've done for the second time now in a generation, which I'm highly, I got to write some more songs about this. I got one, Towers of the Serpent, that kind of is an allegory for wealth inequality. But I got to do some more pissed off songs about this because it's getting bad. But the cost per taxpayer in the country for this bailout they're doing is $18K. So what you really should see the $1,200 on is you're getting a $1,200 rebate on your $18K you're getting taxed, so that the fiscally irresponsible titans of industry here don't go under. You will.
Right. Oh, it's been a mess, man.
That's more of that, like this. That's what that kind of brokenness in the system is. Why people think shit like the government's run by a secret cadre of shape-shifting reptiles who want to destroy Earth. That's the kind of shit that makes people think that.
I do love that the essential worker, about 6 months ago was getting crap for wanting $15 an hour. But then now we're like, no, Taco Bell employees, please stay, go to work. We need you.
Well, I mean, there's this rhetoric that America's really bad at believing that basically it's the guy at the top who's in charge of everything, sort of the great man theory of history, but very much applied to like personal enterprise and economics, that if it weren't for the Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, that we wouldn't get anywhere, that those guys kind of bring us all up, and raise our economic status. And I think that it's pretty much a load of bull that you can't have these, like tech giants and captains of industry, as you used to call them in the 19th century. You can't have these guys without the fucking labor force that actually makes their company work. Right. Even if they're the guy with the brilliant idea or whatever, you need the execution. The general without an army isn't a fucking general, so it's kind of I think that coronavirus basically proves, that it's actually the bottom that the economy rests on. It's a pyramid, and the fucking top bricks don't sit there without the bottom bricks. They would have nothing to sit on. So I think it's kind of a great crime in world history that this lie that you should, that the top's responsible for all the good in the world, and that they deserve all the wealth they could ever want and more as a result, is I think it's really damaging to society. And if you look at statistics about the shrinking of these lower and, what's happening to the middle and lower class in America, it's just, you look at that and you go, what, you're okay with this? It's a bad picture. It's pretty grim, and it doesn't really leave me much hope for my own future or financial security. I see economic articles calling the millennials, which I'm on like the very oldest end of, the lost generation. That's not a great comparison to make. Those are the guys that were like shell-shocked and missing arms after World War I, It's that's a pretty sad comparison, if that's what. Now I've seen multiple media outlets make that one. We get three major financial crises that, you have 2001, the dot-com bust, you have 2008, the major bank bailout, and then 2020, coronavirus. That's three in one. If you're 20 now, you've been hit by three major financial catastrophes that are supposed to kind of come around about once in a generation. So what are you supposed to do? And the answer pretty much is suck it,
When you go through, and I'm sure you're a reader, and I'm sure you like to learn about a lot of this stuff, and so when you come across a piece of time, a piece of history that you want to write about maybe in the future for a future album, how do you compartmentalize that? Do you put it in a note in your phone? Do you just be like, hey, I need to write these lyrics? When it comes time to write lyrics, where do you go to find, I needed to write a song about that type stuff?
Usually it starts with a single line. So I won't ever really start on a event or theme until I can get I can distill it to a line that I'm like, that sounds metal. Right. Until I get there, I won't do it. So the Black Hand reaches out. I just had the chorus line for the longest time, and I kind of wasn't even thinking about the literal Black Hand. Just, I'm thinking, I might use that as a figurative thing. But then when I came down to write the song, I'm like, no, I'll just write about the actual Black Hand it's a real organization that existed. I'll just do that, and that it's got its figurative tinge anyway. Or sometimes the title will come first, like "Woe to the Vanquished." I'm like, that's a sick title, and I end up kind of doing it about like the sack of an ancient city and the kind of cruelty you'd see there, and sort of trying to move it towards get the listener to question like human nature itself via that. I got an idea I'm sitting on now here. I came up with this the other day. I was thinking, what if I did something kind of like Woe to the Vanquished, where it's more like themed around ancient warfare, pre-modern stuff. And I was like, dude, Charlemagne had a sick line that's kind of evil. When they're going around converting the pagans in the early Middle Ages, there's this phrase, and I'm paraphrasing here, but something like pretty much you can convert, you can accept our God or meet yours. And I'm like, that's a pretty good one,
Nice.
So something, stuff like that. I'll try to like latch on to like some cool sounding phrase, and I'll start there because it's a song and you need a fucking cool title and you need a cool phrase. Firepower Kills started that way. There's that song has nothing to do with the time period I got the phrase from, really, or relatively little to do with it. Coffee on me. But so, Henri Philippe Pétain, who's a hero to France in World War I and then a traitor to France in World War II, but before World War I, he said firepower kills, and what he's saying is weapons of today are too fucking scary. You can't just go charging into fields anymore. You'll get cut to pieces. He was right. No one listened. So I took that idea, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's how it was 100 years ago. What about tomorrow? And that's kind of where the whole album idea came from. So even, I can yoink from past events and stuff without even necessarily writing about those events. I can just take the theme and extract it and run with it,
Nice. Well, John Kevill, man, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. And like I said, the latest album, Weapons of Tomorrow, out April 24th. And we're going to end this one off with Glorious End. So give me a little story behind that song.
Oh, shit. Well, there's a hell of a story here. I don't know how I'm going to top the inspiration for this one. It's one of my favorite lyrics I've ever written. I think it manages to get a pretty like emotive side into thrash along with the anger. It's epic for sure. I was traveling around. It was actually on the tour. I was on a Warbringer concert tour, and we had some time off. And I'd gotten married on that trip, so my wife and I were going around Europe seeing stuff. I wanted to go to the Belgian town of Ypres, which was an old World War I battleground. They got these monuments and stuff there. So we go, and there's this monument called the Menin Gate where they have this ceremony called the Last Post, where at 8 p.m. they sound this solemn bugle call for the fallen of World War I. And, it's this really solid thing, and it's being into this giant arch. So it's pretty cool. I had wanted to see it. I'd known about it. So we go to see that. It clears, it's powerful and somber. And I go and I turn the corner, and there's this wreath of poppies laid there. And there's a guy, I'm standing there August 7th, 2017. And there's a guy there who is named Kevill, Keevil, so spelled one letter off from mine, but pronounced the same. In the British Army, Kevill's an Irish name, so that checks out. And he had died August 7th, 1917. So 100 years to the day, I'm standing there just randomly. I'm on tour. I wanted to check out this thing I knew about. And I see a guy with pretty much my name who died exactly 100 years ago to the day there. So that tripped me out. And actually, Firepower Kills and Glorious End both come from that exact same trip. I wrote both those songs that day. And did I write anything down? No, almost never. I don't write anything down until I'm getting to like a late stage and filling in the verses and stuff. All the original, like the starting points for the song just sit in my head and ferment there. And if I don't remember them, that means they weren't good enough. So I pretty much just remembered it. But Glorious End, I wrote all the lyrics to it that night. The entire outro verse and choruses verbatim as they are, and I had the idea for the verse. It sat there for more than 3 years, and now it's getting released. So it was written off of the lyrics to the music, and I did the father voice. There's a little father-son dialogue thing going on there. What I was trying, I felt really sad when I was in Ypres thinking about all the brave dead men, and I just was like, man, these guys that, that just die in these futile, hopeless attacks, getting cut to pieces in no man's land by machine guns for, a few inches of ground. What was going through there? It's like, on one hand, that's really tragic and really almost foolish. And on the other hand, I'm like, I admire these men. Could I be that brave? I don't think so, And there's something just so tragic about it. And so I wanted to really like capture that, kind of not the battle itself, but what makes these guys tick? What makes them go into the battle? What do they say to themselves to get them to do that? And when I started thinking about it at that angle, the song sort of just came to me. And then to actually write it with Carlos, because I'm the only guy who's into this stuff really in the band. So to write it with Carlos, I went, and I don't have any music for it. It's all just lyrics, and I have a feeling in mind. And so I show him a bunch of clips from movies. I showed him the beginning and end of Gallipoli, which actually has Mel Gibson in it from the early 80s. That one has, it's got this father who's like basically hyping his son up like to be a great runner. And then at the end of the movie, when the son's got to do an attack on a Turkish trench, he starts quoting what his father figure said to him, how fast can you run, boy? As fast as a leopard, he was a track runner. And there's just something really like tragic when you wed that personal, like father-son, I'm going to do you proud. I won't be a coward. I'll be brave. That kind of thing, to the sort of tragic and pointless result. And there's just some real like emotional weight there. And so I wrote that song to try to get into that. I love how that one came out. It's probably my favorite on the record. So there's your in-depth explanation of Glorious End.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today. Good luck with the new album, and we will talk to you soon.
Awesome. Hope you enjoyed the interview. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely, man. Take care.
Adios. Bye-bye.
right, huge thanks to John Kevill for taking the time today. Make sure you are rating, reviewing, subscribing to Talk To Me wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a nice 5-star rating, nice 5-star review, Apple Podcasts, or a Facebook recommendation on the Facebook page. Hopefully everybody out there is washing their hands, not touching their face, and staying 6 feet away from everybody. So for the Talk To Me podcast, I've been Joshua Toomey, and I will talk to you guys next Thursday.